Hey everybody, Ace and Chad here. We're going to go over some recent news for you guys. This is some crazy stuff. We're going to get right into it. If you want to follow anything we do, just go to theturnbuckletavern.com. That gives you everything. But CM Punk, Hangman Page, is there beef? Is there backstage heat? Is MJF playing into this? Shoot, work, a lot of crazy shit on the table, Ace. Kick it off. Like, where does this all begin? Let's talk about all the stuff that's been kind of bubbling up in the AEW backstage world.
Well, so essentially, let's go back to the Sean Ross Sapp report about CM Punk allegedly not wanting to show up for Dynamite, and that there was some controversy whether he would or would he not. That wasn't known until that promo that he cut in the ring with calling out Hangman Page. And I know they made light of it on BT, and this is for, we'll move down further in it, but it seemed weird. And everyone was confused. Like, is that the direction we're moving at All Out? Is it not going to be Moxley versus CM Punk? Is it going to be Hangman versus CM Punk in a rematch? But the fact that we got no culmination of Hangman coming out and addressing and getting his word in sort of leans into the fact it might be a work, but it just seems like there's underlying history with Hangman and CM Punk, and you would ask yourself, what is it? CM Punk allegedly alludes to it. I went back and watched some of the old promos building up to Double or Nothing about him alleging that CM Punk is a locker room cancer, kind of alluded to the situation with Colt Cabana, which might have been something that CM Punk did not want aired out on live TV. So now we're sitting here and asking ourselves, is it possible that Tony Khan and this crew, they're trying to turn CM Punk heel in a meta way, similar to MJF in that situation, but the only way they're going to get people to boo CM Punk is something like this. And the whole wrestling community kind of bit on it and said, he's kind of a dick. We all knew this was happening.
Okay, so let's go back to where this all started. You're talking about that promo between Punk and Hangman, where he kind of alluded to the locker room cancer situation, maybe Colt Cabana, maybe, Colt Cabana was with Dark Order. Hangman was close to them. Maybe it pissed Hangman off legit. And he kind of brought that in without Punk's knowledge into a live promo on Dynamite. First things first, do you think that was planned, or do you think that seed was actually legit? Now, what do you think?
Well, there's a huge thing. I mean, it depends on what camp you lie in. If you believe this is a worked shoot, then I think you have to say that everything is thrown in the table, similar to Sean and Brett, where they were throwing real life situations into their storyline feud. And we obviously know that sometimes the lines get blurred and people actually get upset about what is said in the ring. You can go back to Sunny Days with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. We know that that is something that has legs past this. I mean, Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, their rivalry was more than just in the ring, clearly, but we're not here to talk about that. But the fact that Hangman brought that up, I think there's some real life drama, and this was always going to bubble over because of the fact that Colt Cabana's in the locker room. We talked about this,
and he's beloved. He's beloved,
right? So the fact that CM Punk sort of used his leverage and his star power to allegedly push Colt Cabana out, and Tony Khan said, "You know what? There's a safe island that's called Ring of Honor. Let's put him there." And I think that also Hangman bringing that into the ring, it wouldn't shock me if CM Punk was legitimately hot about it.
Okay, so from there, Punk gets injured. Punk is away. He's off TV. He makes his return recently, gets a live mic at the top of last week's Dynamite. One of the first things, as he's cutting that promo, I'm thinking he's talking about Moxley. Or I didn't realize it was going to turn into him directing it at Hangman. So that was like, what are we doing here? It felt weird. Now, Sean Ross Sapp, we showed the tweet earlier, but Sean Ross Sapp would go on to say that one source familiar with the situation said they believed there was a chance CM Punk wasn't even going to show up at that Dynamite where he went in on Hangman. I don't buy that. This whole one source said, who the fuck is the source? It just seems to me like at that point I'm like, okay, you're getting worked is where my head goes.
Yeah, but in the history of wrestling, Dave Meltzer's never been worked. So I think unless he's in on this, and you can make that argument that Dave Meltzer is getting himself involved in the weeds here and wants to create this storyline that has to do with the Wrestling Observer. But if you start to look at this in legitimacy, you could say that it kind of contradicts what the Wrestling Observer stands for. If he allows himself to be worked in this way, it's
I don't think Meltzer. Yeah, I don't think Meltzer's in on it. I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
If it comes out that he is not in on it and he is worked, that is detrimental to the whole legacy of the Wrestling Observer, and that's a whole other conversation about if he's able to get worked, if Sean Ross Sapp is able to get worked. PW Insider confirms it as well. I don't know if we're really ever going to know the story, but they have a lot to lose here if they report on this as a legitimate incident, saying that Punk is unhappy, saying that Punk is bitter, saying that Punk wants to leave. Then I think it also people start to second guess everything that's going on. And, you know, there's some precedent set here. We talked about obviously MJF only a couple months ago. They were just worked with the flight stuff.
Now, do you think, like, Meltzer came out and he said the CM Punk thing at the start of the show with Adam Page, that was weird for everyone. Nobody knew he was going to do that. If you remember months ago when they were feuding and I said there was a lot of reality to it, well, there's a lot of reality to it. And that's Wrestle Purists on Twitter. They're retweeting a quote from the Wrestling Observer. Now, with that, do you think this might be one of those situations where there was some legit reality and there was some legit heat, but now they're taking that and spinning it? I mean, wrestling, that's kind of like been the story of great pro wrestling, is taking real life situations and making them work for you on the screen in a work form. Do you think that's the situation we're in, that maybe this is coming out of reality and now they're going to turn it and trick us?
It's definitely possible. When I first heard this, I thought there was some legitimacy to it, but as it sort of hemmed on, when they announced that Moxley and CM Punk match happening on Dynamite, my immediate thought was Punk's not going to be around. And they're just trying to get the title off of him and moving on, because there's no way that you pay off Moxley versus CM Punk on the Dynamite 2 weeks before All Out. That doesn't make sense. But if you want to sort of be a conspiracy theorist and put on your tinfoil hat, that's exactly what they would want you to think, because they want this to feel very, very real, very raw. And we all talked about this. We're all sick of CM Punk being this, I'm happy to be here, doing the whole tour,
the
around
victory
all these
lap.
Cities, the victory lap, exactly. We want bitter CM Punk. And what's there to be bitter about when he's happy to be here? They're almost creating this, and I use the word meta, but that's truly what it is, this meta heel turn where he has to use the dirt sheets and use the smart wrestling fans to boo him. And I know that's not the only way to turn him heel, but I think it will work, because right now you look at the backlash about everything that was said. There were people saying CM Punk's bad for AEW, CM Punk shouldn't be doing this. But you run the risk as Tony Khan, if this is a work, you run the risk of turning your company heel, just like the MJF situation, and you don't want that on your hands. The company's 3 years old right now. You can't sit here and say this is good publicity for the company to be dragged like this twice in the last 6 months.
Well, yeah, 100%. And look at the whole the match where Punk won the title. That was against Hangman. So you were in a situation where they were really stretching it to make that a compelling feud, just because you had two beloved baby faces going in, and they were trying to, I mean, there were lines that Hangman was saying that was borderline heel. There were lines that Punk was saying in the promos leading up to that were borderline heel. And now we're in a situation where Mox has that interim championship. People love Mox. So now you're entering it into All Out with Mox Punk in another situation where you have two beloved people, and their promo that they cut on last week's Dynamite, you could argue that both of them were teetering into saying, he said that in a heelish way. Mox said, like, they're both teetering. So I'm wondering if they're like trying to course correct and make Punk a heel. And the big elephant in the room is there's a lot of rumors on the table that MJF's going to return, because Mox and Punk are set for this Dynamite tomorrow night. And everyone's thinking MJF's going to come in and somehow play a part in this. Now, Meltzer came out after all of this is done, Tony Khan announced that Punk and Mox were going to be going in a title versus title match tomorrow night on Dynamite, which you're 2 weeks out from All Out. And we're thinking that's the main event of All Out, and you're giving it to us 2 weeks before, which instantly gets your mind going, shoot, work. Are they trying to take the title off of someone? What are they doing here? But then Meltzer comes out and says the plan is still to have CM Punk versus Jon Moxley at AEW All Out on Sunday, September 4th, despite the match being announced for Wednesday's Dynamite. So when I hear that, where does your mind go when you hear those reports, Ace?
Well, there's an easy out if you're WWE, but AEW does not have the track record of false advertising that WWE does as far as matches go. You can talk about announcements and making all these big surprises, and it doesn't live up. But as far as advertising the match in the ring, getting the two guys face to face, they've always delivered. They don't end the match in these schmaz finishes with all the gaga and throwing guys in the ring and say, you have to now buy the pay-per-view to see the match. WCW was guilty of this. WWF was guilty of this. And you can make the argument it was good for wrestling to have that because it builds more story. Maybe AEW is going to be doing that. But again, you run the risk of sort of being everything you said you weren't going to be. You want to be an athletic competition. You want to have some actual wrestling legitimacy. You want to have your stipulations mean something. When you say something, it should mean something. And I think WWE has proven, doesn't matter what they say, stipulations be damned, doesn't matter. The match can end in DQ, and you know it's still going to happen at the next pay-per-view. Here in AEW, if this happens, it's sort of changing the course of how they've been booking. And maybe that's not such a bad thing, but I think that this Wednesday, tomorrow night, will be a huge test for Tony Khan to see how he unravels this mess. Because let's be honest, right now he has a mess on his hands.
Well, especially in the world title scene, they've done such a good job of keeping that belt prestigious. Even though the interim thing happened and all of that, like they've done a really good job. Not a lot of people have held that title. I mean, I know it's a young company, but still, yet they've kept it prestigious. But here lately, they have been doing things that do seem like they're leaning into like some of that WWE style booking. I think of how they turned Luchasaurus, and then literally 2 weeks later, he's going back. So they're flip-flopping people. And then I think of the TNT title situation when Sammy and Scorpio Sky were trading that title. It was like ping pong. So it's like they are kind of booking themselves out of trouble in certain situations. And I wonder if this is kind of along those lines, and this is kind of a pattern we're seeing of them trying to course correct things that maybe have gotten away from them. But I think there's a method to the madness. I think there's something coming that's big that I think is going to be a reactionary thing to Triple H taking over WWE, and WWE's booking really kind of hitting its stride right now, and really kind of, I keep saying course correcting, but WWE is course correcting a long history of bad booking with Vince McMahon, and Triple H is kind of doing that. And I think we might see Tony Khan try and do that. Now, having said that, do you think one of those things he may try to do is bring back MJF before All Out to generate those pay-per-view buys? And if he is going to bring back MJF, do you think it's the right decision?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to be said here, and the way you'd book MJF is, I've been on the table saying I did not like the MJF thing because I thought it made Wardlow take a backseat, and I think we've seen it's kind of played out that way, that Wardlow has become secondary to that story.
There's been a few people that they've booked like that lately.
100%. With the MJF thing, you don't want to hit the panic button because of how WWE's booking, but what they do have to panic about is they have a lot of negotiations to be putting and getting in the room with Warner Media, whoever's going to buy AEW as far as TV rights go, and putting them on, because that's going to be a huge deal for their future. They have to be on a major network, and that's not a given right now. I think if you would have asked Tony Khan 2 years ago, a year ago, they were doing numbers that they'd probably be very, very proud of. Right now, we're seeing record lows for Rampage. Dynamite's flirting with some of the lows, and they're not able to make the headway. And I think this is sort of what they've been sowing with this MJF stuff. And yeah, if it pays off long term, it's going to be huge. But right now, there's a lot of things out there that people are becoming discouraged with the booking. And when you start to have the dirt sheets play a part, we talk about casual fans driving the market and getting people involved in the product. us diehards were here. We're the ones reading the dirt sheet. So when you're working that, you're working us, but we're already here. It's like catch 22. You already have us. How do you get that casual fan that's watching WWE that just likes wrestling to come on over and watch your product? That's going to let AEW take the next step. Is it the MJF realism storyline? It just might be. But I think you run the risk of it not working. You're going to start to look in the mirror and say, we made a mess of the situation by blurring the lines too much.
If they bring him in, it's all in the execution of it. I'm not against it, but gut reaction right now, them bringing him back right now doesn't make a lot of sense, especially if he somehow finds his way in that title match at All Out, because the guy, the last time we saw him, he cuts this scathing pipe bomb-esque promo where he's calling out Tony Khan and his decision making and alluding that he may go to WWE, and his mic gets cut a la 2011 CM Punk, so it was him against the company. The company's kind of went dark on him. He's not mentioned. He's never mentioned on television. So to just bring him back and thrust him into a world title scene, I don't know how it makes sense. So that has me very intrigued of how are you going to put this guy in this angle and have me buy in after the groundwork you've laid in the story? So I don't know if it does seem like all roads lead to him coming back, but at the same time, I guess I have to see it play out, because right now it gives me an uneasy feeling to see him thrust into this storyline.
Well, two things before we move too far away from the Hangman promo. The big thing that I read too, and I know Meltzer reported it, Sean Ross Sapp also reported as well, there was conversation in the back, whether it was CM Punk to Hangman directly or CM Punk to people close to him. He said he will never put Hangman over, which is very similar to Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. And they may be leaning into history, or it might be something true. But this doesn't seem like the CM Punk that came back, especially a couple weeks ago at Comic-Con, when he's talking about putting young talent over and how great it is, how he's having the best time of his life. And similar to the Instagram post, if you want to put that up here, the Instagram post where he was celebrating 1 year. It's no coincidence that this is a year since he returned. I think this is all sort of serendipity of how he's trying to book himself into a heel. We know CM Punk could be a dastardly heel. It's hard for him, as the legend he is, the biggest pop. I think a big test for him is trying to work heel in Chicago. And, he's never going to be fully booed, but I think that's a challenge he's probably putting himself up to. If he works the fans enough and makes him feel he's a locker room cancer, I don't think it has the benefit for AEW, but it might benefit a heel CM Punk down the line. We don't have to like the road we're getting there, but I think the final product, if it is MJF and CM Punk, with the double switch of MJF being the ultra face somehow, that rebel face coming back against the company, and a heel CM Punk, all of this might be worth it. But it seems very messy how we get there. I don't know how we get through these trees to have that and make it make sense, because it needs to make sense. You can't just pull him on TV and say, here's MJF in the title picture. That makes no goddamn sense for how they left him off.
No, and the Punk IG post, he's saying things like, 1 year, best year of my professional career, not enough space to post all the great pics, rekindled passion, new friends, reunited with old ones, can't stop smiling. He's saying things like, it's almost like he's hearing the shit online, and this is a direct response to that. And then you have Dax posting a tweet with Punk that says, he gave me the jobber jaw punch pose, and if you can't tell, he's, all caps, very unhappy. So you've got people almost like wrestlers are almost poking fun at the reports, which makes you go into that whole shoot work thing, on the, put it all on the table right now, Ace. Is this a shoot? Is this a work?
Wow. I mean, I was dead wrong on the MJF stuff, because I would have died on that hill that flight was booked and he was going to fucking New Jersey. I thought that was what's happening.
Yeah.
This feels like a work. It has to be, because the only thing I don't like about it being a work is because two things. It's so close to May and what they just did with MJF, but we know these two guys are now interchangeably connected for the rest of time. These guys in their AEW careers are always going to be the Macho Hogans. They're going to be matched up, because right now MJF's biggest rival will always be CM Punk. I can't see anyone else topping that over time. So I think the fact that they both kind of go through this phase to get to that final culmination of that third match together, the rubber match, if you will, the story writes itself. But I just think it's a risky move right now because you are making, again, AEW a bad guy. The company was always this babyface company. And I say always, it's only been 3 years. It's easy to turn WWF heel when Vince McMahon screws Bret Hart because they already have established 1985 WrestleMania ago. It's 12 years. You have a legacy. You have a stronghold in the market. AEW is such an infant right now, and to turn them heel, and we don't even have a figurehead for it. Who exactly is MJF feuding with right now? Just the letters? Just AEW? Just the logo? Tony Khan's not an on-screen character, so how are we going to sit here?
And I don't want to see him as an on-screen character.
So it just becomes like, what is the payoff of all this? And if it's MJF versus CM Punk, cool, I'm down for it, but we could have got there in another way. You don't want to book yourself into a corner and make yourself look lesser than, and to kind of plant the seeds that there's derision in the locker room and that all these guys don't like each other and the chemistry's there. And
I don't buy it.
Are not happy. Fuck, man. If we pull up the Meltzer long quote here, the last thing he had said, there's a part of me where I just think Tony Khan needs to sit everyone down and air everything out before it gets worse. The big thing that started all of this is that Colt Cabana is not in the Dark Order with no angle and stop being brought to television. So he goes on, and you guys can go back to Wrestling Observer Radio from August 22nd. This is the day after AEW Dynamite with the Hangman promo, the Hangman being called out promo. The other thing is, he also mentions the shot about being, this isn't cowboy shit, but coward shit, and that the apology must be as loud in public as the disrespect. This was definitely not an angle, although like everything, it could be turned into one down the line. The backstory on this was Punk was mad at Paige about an interview before the Double or Nothing pay-per-view, as we just alluded to. So I just don't see the benefit of doing something like this to overshadow this main event that was supposed to feel like, whether it is or it isn't, the biggest match in AEW history. Now everyone's not even talking about Moxley versus CM Punk. And it may draw a rating. Yeah, it's going to pop a huge rating tomorrow. But is that what you really want here?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I hate that it's always like, I feel like most fans, especially AEW fans, it's always like, it's a work. There's real shit happening. I do think there's a nugget of truth here that's being spun into a story. But at the same time, there's a big part of me. I don't know if I'm buying that Hangman is so upset in the back with Punk. Everything I've heard from the dude, I've met the guy in person, just the way he is, the way you hear other people talk about him, he is the most easygoing, go with the flow. He's not a shit disturber. He's not a guy causing problems. He's one of the original guys in AEW. He came up, I mean, he's best friends with the couple founders of AEW and the Bucks and Kenny and Cody and, you know, that whole crew. I just don't know if, like, is he going to cause a shitstorm over Colt Cabana? I don't know if I buy that. Is he... I don't know. It seems very storyline to me. Like, are they that close in the back, or is this just playing into on-screen storytelling?
I just think it kind of speaks to, it's not just Colt Cabana the person, it's what it represents, the fact that someone can come in off this all this time lost and pull this trigger and lose this guy in a storyline. He was involved in Dark Order, and yes, they weren't a prominent part of TV for a long time now, but Colt Cabana has a lot of respect in the back. I think it's just what it represents, and if we put it on the table and say this is a shoot, CM Punk is completely in the wrong here because you didn't give an opportunity. It's Wrestling 101. You can't bury a guy in the ring while he's not even able to get back on the mic and go back and forth. We've seen promos where it's a work, it's a shoot, but you can't have CM Punk call out Hangman Page and not have the opportunity to come out. You know he's not coming out in the back. It just makes him look like he's one of your top guys that you want to put over. And yes, Punk did beat him, but at the same time, CM Punk knows better than that. So that makes me feel like it is a work, because how could you do that to your face, almost the face of your company as far as baby faces go?
Dude, and this plays it, like, if this is a shoot and everything is legit coming out and the reports of Punk demanding that Colt Cabana be forced out of the company, dude, that is like everything that his naysayers have said about him putting it on Front Street and confirming those reports, confirming the way Stamford has talked about him. And if that's just who he is, maybe that's just who he is. But to me, it's like that is so against everything you've heard from everyone who's talked about him being in this company. Like, he is the most supportive guy in the back. You hear it from everyone. And going back to Hangman and him being a fun-loving guy, and I don't know how I can buy into him being so upset, even if it's just the kind of the overall. It's not so much about Cabana, like you're saying. It was more about the look of it all. I have a clip from the most recent episode of Being the Elite. If this guy's so hot about this, let's play the clip and then we'll talk about it. This is from this past Monday's Being the Elite.
We're going to be outnumbered. We're at a disadvantage, but so the fuck what? We'll have to work harder. I want to see more intensity. I want to see more fire. I want to see more sex. I want to see more. Yeah.
Hangman, Punk's in the ring.
Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up! We're doing something really important here. Get the fuck out of here, Jeff! Get out, Jeff! Get out! What are you doing? Let's get back to training and go, boys!
So essentially, Jeff comes in, Punk's in the ring. He's alluding to Punk's talking shit about you in the ring. Now, Being the Elite has been known to take real life situations and spin them into comedy. I mean, that's kind of what that show has really thrived off of. Is this another situation where you're taking a real life event, or is this them poking fun at the dirt sheets and the fans who are buying into this drama?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they've done it before, as you said, you alluded to it when you said they use it to kind of just poke funs and be, breaking that fourth wall. That's what BTE is when it's at its best, when they're breaking that fourth wall and making people whatever thing that, killing Adam Cole and all that stuff that went on there, and Cody Rhodes being being possessed by the WWE demons and all of that. We've seen real life storylines come to light here, and man, I can't see Hangman doing something like this if it was something he was really hot about. But yeah, I think it errs on if you're going to put it in a camp and say, is it work, shoot? I think this sort of kind of supports work if we're looking at that video. But BTE, who knows? But I don't think Hangman would be involved in something like that. There's no reason to do it. Absolutely. Unless you want to poke fun. He doesn't have to do it. It wasn't like they promised to do it on Being the Elite. So any final thoughts on this before we wrap up? I mean, I'm kind of in the camp of, it feels like a work to me. I feel like it's a work that's came out of a bit of a shoot. I don't think the reports are as serious as they're being made to be. I'm not trying to discredit Meltzer, because unlike a lot of people, I respect Meltzer and his historical just knowledge of the business. I love Brian Alvarez. Like, I appreciate those guys. You need those guys in pro wrestling. I'm not trying to say what they're saying is wrong, but I think maybe the people, I just don't think it's as serious as it is. I think there are nuggets of truth, but I think in the end they're taking a little bit of nuggets of truth and spinning it into something, making it seem bigger than it is. Yep, but it's a slippery slope if you start using your news outlets to convey storylines, because where does it end? When you want to convey real life storylines and financials and what's a storyline, what's not. And I think as wrestling fans, we benefit from the fact that storylines are going to be intertwined and have reality based in them. But for those that want real information, that are not just looking for the storyline, who can you trust? I mean, it starts when you start to undercut the media, and we saw this with the election all these years ago. You undercut the media, you undercut the newspapers. Who can you trust as far as getting you news from? And if this is something that can happen with the Wrestling Observer newsletter, I don't think you can trust any news outlet as far as wrestling goes if this is proven to be a work and they're able to be worked this easily. For guys that have 45 plus years in the business, like Dave Meltzer, if he's able to be worked here, well, then we can't trust anything he's saying. So there's a lot on the line here about him. So I don't think he would report it if he didn't feel very confident that this was something that was absolutely true.
Yeah,
only time will tell, though, at this point.
Right, I'm with you. I don't think it discredits Dave in any way. I mean, this is the nature of the business. I will say, like, I agree with you to a certain extent that it's a slippery slope, but in today's pro wrestling, the only way to work the me's and you's of pro wrestling, and that's the hardcore fans, is to work the dirt sheets, the journalists, the news outlets. It's hard to get people truly bought in without lying to the people that are reporting the news, you know?
100%, because at this point, like I said, this is CM Punk turning meta heel. You can't just go out there and rip on the hometown city now. You can't say Chicago stinks and their pizza sucks. You have to go out there and make people feel like you're destroying the company you were trying to.
Yep.
And we also think about the NWO. And I mean, Shot Nostalgia, shout out Friday at 7 p.m. You guys can check us out. But the NWO, the whole basis is 3 guys that take over a whole company, and they're pretty much successful. So what does that say about World Championship Wrestling? Maybe in the long run, the payoff was WCW did go under, and there was other booking decisions based in there, and Vince Russo, and
yeah, there's a lot to that,
all that bullshit. But it all starts with you take 2 guys with baseball bats who show up and take on your whole goddamn roster,
and they become cooler than your guys.
What's the cost of all this is what I'm saying. What's the cost of working the dirt sheets and making Tony Khan look like an imbecile, that he can't run a locker room, that all of a sudden his hand's in too many pots? Is there a benefit from this? Is it just, to get a buy rate? If that's the benefit, then I think it's probably not worth it. But who are we to say we're enjoying the product at this point? We're going to have a lot of answers tomorrow about, 24 hours from now, almost 24 hours, with this Moxley and CM Punk match. When it's all said and done, I think we're going to have more answers than questions. And I think that's going to be a good thing, not a bad thing. I'm not sure if you froze, Chad. But, I think Chad is frozen for a second. I'm going to remove him for 1 second. So the biggest thing that I want everyone to realize is that when something like this happens, you have to consider all your sources. And I know Dave Meltzer is looked upon as someone who is trustworthy. People that hate on him are always going to hate on him. They're going to look at him and say, he's someone who just tries to stir the pot. He has the people that he absolutely trusts. The Young Buck relationship certainly has muddied the water. People believe that the Observer's on the AEW payroll. But all this stuff is something that you need to really consider when you're talking about the storylines, because as we were saying, this is uncharted territory. And I wanted to thank a couple people in the chat here. We got King of Hueco Mundo, so thank you being in here. And I think some comments in here. I think Punk turning heel and MJF returning as a face, challenging, but we've seen double switches happen. We also have AEW needs more time, better time frames to push every talent they got. And then final comment, all I know is that Chicago is Punk's house. He's working us, and his diabolical plan is working because Punk and AEW have been trending all week on social media. 100%. And I think at this point, that's what they want. And we have negotiating deals as far as TV deal goes, and their TV deal is expiring with Warner Media. They have to figure out a way to get the best possible deal, lock themselves up, and then be in a comfort zone. So I'm going to wrap up for us. I appreciate you joining for us. Make sure you guys follow, like, subscribe, everything on the Turnbuckle Tavern. Tonight we have Fig Night. We also have the Raw Down. We have all these great shows coming up. Make sure you guys... Oh, and we also have the debuting show of the Long Balls. Make sure you guys check that out with Hawk and J-Bone. Everything we got you covered. Not only just wrestling, we got you covered with football. We got you covered at every angle. We even got you covered in broken VCR. What else can you ask for with old school movies? I've been the Ace, and for Chad with Turnbuckle Tavern, this has been In the News. We'll see you soon.